Hello, good evening, everyone. You're all very, very welcome. Thanks for joining us here on our Tuesday evening broadcast. A lot of information to share with you tonight. A lot of things been happening on the RSE front. So we would love to hit the share button, share out the link. And also, if you have any questions or comments, would love you to put them in the captions. No Clive tonight. Clive's in sunny Spain. So we wish Clive a happy time over there as he's spending some time there with his family and friends. And again, thanks, Mark, for joining us. So we're going to be discussing what the new curriculum looks like. So this is a very topical, and a lot of questions have been raised in relation to that. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But before that, Mark, I want you to just talk briefly about the adjournment debate that took place tonight in Parliament within the last hour and a half, and just some of your reflections on that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Johnny Buckley's event last night. So thanks, Mark.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't aware, tonight there was an adjournment debate at Westminster that Carla Lockhart had secured. The adjournment debate takes place after the day's proceedings have already happened. So basically the House's business is finished for the day, and then they can have a debate. And Carla spoke very passionately about a number of the issues that have been raised with regards to the way this matter has been forced in here, the way there has been no consultation with parents on content, the way the consultation is very limited in its scope. There is no opt-out for teachers being provided, and she pointed out very rightly that here in Northern Ireland, there are very strongly held views around abortion, around gender ideologies, and stuff like that. And there is no protection whatsoever for teachers and children to be protected from this kind of content. And in response, the Secretary of State is at an event tonight. So it was some guy who had never spoken at the dispatch box who basically got up and read out a pre-written statement. And it was very much along the same lines as it always is. Secretary of State is legally bound to do all this stuff. And because of that, he just has to do it, and you just have to suck it up. And for me, it really hit home that the government, the UK government, and the Secretary of State don't care one bit about what you think. They don't care one bit about what people here think. They don't care about the people who live here, who have children who go to our schools. They don't care what our schools think. They don't care what teachers think. They don't care what governors think. They are doing this, and they are doing it whether you like it or whether you don't. And for me, it really drove home the fact that devolution here in Northern Ireland is dead. It is gone. It's finished. Because the Secretary of State, and we'll go into this a little bit tonight, the Secretary of State, in terms of CEDAW, has the power to appoint himself, as the education minister, or appoint himself as the health minister, in order to force through the changes that CEDAW require him to make. And there's nothing at all that a single person here in Northern Ireland can do about it. Because if our Stormont Assembly try to change anything he does, he will stop them from doing that in the future. So devolution is dead. It is non-existent. And for me personally, there is no point in having Stormont back up and running unless we have control over the issues that matter so much to people here. And Carla tonight in Parliament very clearly showed just how much this matters to the people who live here in Northern Ireland. And if it matters that much that she can raise it in Parliament, then it should matter enough that we make the repeal of Section 9 a red line issue whenever it comes to getting Stormont back up and running. And we should, as all parties who claim to support devolution, should be rejecting Section 9 and calling for it to be repealed, so that the power over these issues that matter so much to the people here get returned to the people that they should belong to, and that is us who actually live here. So those were the big takeaways for me from tonight, that the government don't care, they're not going to listen, and that Section 9 really does have to go before we get any kind of Stormont Executive or Assembly back up and running again. In the meantime, until that happens, and until we can undo the damage that the Secretary of State is doing, there is no political, there's no political way of getting out of this. There's no political outcome here that will see this stopped. And therefore, it's going to come down to boards of governors, teachers and parents taking a direct stand against the Secretary of State, deliberately breaking the law that he is forcing upon us, and saying no. And I've got an advert at the bottom of the screen here tonight for our open letter from school staff. So our open letter now has 290 odd school teachers, classroom assistants, and support staff have signed it across the communities in Northern Ireland, across the different types of school. And they've said very clearly, you either give us an opt-out or we don't teach it, and we will break the law if that is what is required. So please continue to share the letter with the teachers that you know. Ask them to sign it to show their support to this. And we'll get into a little bit more on the content as the night goes on further. So Wesley, do you want to talk a little bit about last night?
Yeah, really incredible night last night at the Seagu Hotel in Portadown. I think somewhere in around, almost around 500 people gathered into Johnny Buckley's launch of Let Kids In. Incredible showing from the DUP party. Lots of their MLAs and councillors and MPs backing Johnny's campaign. And Johnny made a very, very impassioned speech. And I think one of the key lines for me was the talking of Section 9, how that is the root of all of these issues, and how that effectively will need to be repealed before any stable government can ever come back here. So the panel had 4 professionals on it: Christian Institute, Marion Woods from Matter, and there was a head teacher and another gentleman from the Transfers Council. So the discussion was very interesting in terms of their thoughts on how we can go forward. I think certainly from our perspective, there is too much confidence in the consultation process that this will change the government's mind. It will clearly not. The government has very clearly said tonight, we don't really care. Even if you're 100% against this, they may give a very limited opt-out, but long term, they are going to mandatorily force this education on our children, and we're here to stop that. So, very good night, and I think it shows that there is great public interest in it, and we just trust and pray that'll continue as the days and weeks continue. So, Mark, over to your presentation, and look forward to that. Any questions or comments, please put them on the chat, and we'll try and get them later on. So, thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Wesley. And yes, as we were saying earlier, one of the real hot topics at the minute is what is the curriculum actually going to look like whenever it is brought forward by the Department of Education towards the end of this year. And we've done a real deep dive into trying to decipher the information that's out there at the minute in order to be able to give you the best possible view of what is going to happen. And it is such a deep dive that we've actually had to split it in two parts. So we're going to run this across the course of 2 weeks. The first part is tonight. And really what we want to try to do is have a look at the different opinions that are out there in the public domain with regards to what content will actually appear on the new curriculum. Because there's a vast range of a vast spectrum of opinions on what the new curriculum will look like. Some people are holding to a very extreme view, that the curriculum will be the absolute most extreme thing that you've ever seen and could ever imagine being taught in schools. Meanwhile, at the same time, you have the likes of the Evangelical Alliance and Love for Life, who are a third-party provider. They're sharing information that's really saying, listen, these changes are minor. It's more of an opportunity than a threat. And because of that, and as well as that, the schools will still be able to teach these things in line with their own ethos. Now, the reality we feel is somewhere in between. We feel that it is going to be much worse than what the likes of the Evangelical Alliance and Love for Life are saying, but much not as bad as what some of the more extreme groups are saying on the issue. So we want to take you through the main points, and the 2 points we're really going to be looking at in particular are: one, will schools be able to teach the new curriculum in line with their own ethos? And two, the second thing we want to look at is, will the changes to the curriculum only be based around abortion and contraception? So they're the two main claims of what I would call the RSE light camp are making, and we really want to look at their claims and test them against the evidence that is out there. A little bit of a plug just before we move on. All of our information is available online on niagainstrse.com. You can also go up to the top left-hand corner of the screen, and you'll see a little QR code. If you scan the QR code, you'll get added to our WhatsApp information group, where we put all our posts and all our comments on. If you go onto our social media pages, our YouTube page, or our Facebook pages, you'll see that there is information available on the consultation, on other aspects of the work that we do as well. So before we get started into looking at content specifically, what I thought would be useful to do is have a look at the Northern Ireland curriculum in general, and kind of bring you up to speed on how the curriculum itself works. And then from there, have a look at the changes that are going to be happening over the next little while. Now, as a teacher, one of the things that I'm very conscious of is that I may talk about technical jargon of which the vast majority of people have no idea what I'm talking about. Now, as a maths teacher, I have always tried to adopt the KISS method in my teaching, which stands for Keep It Simple Stupid. So I'm trying to make this as simple and concise as I can, but I recognize that some people may find some of the content tonight a little bit hard to keep up with. So if you do have any questions at any stage, pop them into the chat. We can stop, we can go back, we can go forward, we can talk about anything that you want to talk about as we go through this evening. So the Northern Ireland curriculum, the revised curriculum for Northern Ireland, was launched in 2007. And it was a deviation from the curriculum that we had before, in that it tried to remove some of the really heavily prescriptive stuff that was contained within the old curriculum. And it was more to give schools and teachers the flexibility to deliver their subjects in a way that suited them and suited their schools and their pupils best. Now, we can't have an education in absolute free-for-all in terms of the content that is taught. So what the government did back in 2006 and 2007, when the curriculum was launched, is they set down legislation that laid out the minimum content that was to be taught in each individual area of the curriculum. So as a maths teacher, I can go onto that legislation and I can see the absolute minimum content that I must teach at, for example, Key Stage 3, which is year 8 to year 10. Now, on the legislation, it's very much just headings that appear. And then the Department of Education provide guidance on that content. So they give a range of examples of things that a school might want to think about in terms of the content that they deliver. But it's not prescriptive. They don't tell you how to deliver the content. They give you examples of, you might want to think about this. And that's in line with what the whole aims of the curriculum were, to give teachers the opportunity to develop a curriculum that suited their school best. Curriculum development is carried out by SIA. SIA will provide a bunch of resources. Now, when it comes to examination classes, we will pay a lot of attention to what SIA say in terms of their curriculum development. But for the likes of Key Stage 3, where there's no examinations, a lot of schools will develop their own curriculum around different subject areas. Big emphasis on the cross-curricular skills. And I know a lot of people have been talking about, and they find it quite strange, the idea the RSE could be taught in a bunch of different subjects across the school. But that's in line with the way that the curriculum works in general. So as a maths teacher, children shouldn't just experience maths in the mathematics classroom. They should experience maths across the curriculum and have opportunities to develop their skills in maths across a range of different subjects. Now, that lends itself well to some subjects like physics and chemistry, biology. It doesn't lend itself just as well to some subjects like RE or art, but there should be an opportunity to develop those skills. But central to all of this, central to the whole concept of the curriculum, is that schools are to develop their own curriculum based on their own needs. So the schools have their own curriculum policy, and they have middle management teams who devise a scheme of work for schemes of work for each of their departments based on the needs of the pupils that they have. And that works for maths, it works for English, it works for modern languages, but it also works for something that was new in 2007 called Learning for Life and Work. And these were a range of classes that are to develop pupils as well-rounded individuals who should be able to step out into real life and into the world of work and understand different areas around what they call LLW, which include personal development, citizenship, and employability. Now, RSE is delivered through the personal development strand, and although they talk about this as being a cross-curricular subject, RSE, it is mostly developed through specific personal development classes. Now, we talked about here the idea of minimum content and guidance from the department on the content, but then the schools developing their own, and it works pretty much exactly the same when it comes to RSE. So here is this is straight off the government website. This is the legislation around RSE. It's really hard to see on this, but this end column has a series of headings that are very general. They say this is the minimum content that must be looked at in Key Stage 3 in relationships. And what the department have done with that is they've basically taken that exact table and they've provided guidance on it. So that end column, the bits in bold, are taken directly from the legislation, and the Department of Education have added examples. And if I go to the end column and try to enlarge it a little bit for you, you'll see that under each of the 6 headings, they've said, for example. So that is them giving guidance on the content that schools must teach as part of their minimum content, but it's not prescriptive. So schools don't have to teach all of the aspects that are listed here and are free to change the RSE curriculum in line with their own school ethos and the needs of their pupils. Now, there are pros and cons to that. So when it comes to minimum content, the big pro is that schools have the ability to tailor their RSE curriculum to match their ethos. And if the school has a Christian ethos, they can tailor their curriculum accordingly. The big con is there's no maximum content. So as long as schools are delivering the minimum content, they are free to add any additional material that they want. And there are many schools in Northern Ireland, especially in the integrated sector, that don't have a Christian ethos, who have gone way beyond the minimum content, and are already delivering some pretty shocking stuff to the pupils that they teach. So please be aware, and we've been saying this right from the start. If you've got a child at school, what you need to do is, first of all, find out what's on their RSE policy. You need to contact the school if you can't find it on their website. Ask to see any resources if you're concerned about any aspect of their policy, and address all communications to the Board of Governors. So in terms of the changes that are happening, in order to understand them, we need to go back a little bit in time. And in 2018, there was a CEDAW report, which is a UN committee, made a report on abortion, specifically in Northern Ireland. That led into Section 9, which led into abortion regulations, which now lead into the RSE regulations. Now, the CEDAW report, and I think from the perspective of talking to a lot of people, those who are saying that the curriculum is going to be absolutely extreme are of the opinion that this is being forced from above. You've got the UN and the WHO are pushing this down onto the country, where the reality is this is coming from within. So CEDAW would not have come to this country unless they had been invited by pro-abortion activists who wanted to change the law here with regards to abortion, and invited CEDAW to come to our country and make a report. Now, CEDAW, remind me, when I was growing up, I loved The Simpsons. I would watch The Simpsons all the time. And Lionel Hutz was the kind of notoriously bad lawyer, very corrupt. There was one episode where Bart had got knocked down by Mr. Burns's car, and they were trying to take him for a lot of money, and they made up all these injuries and stuff. CEDAW remind me of, they're the Lionel Hutz of the kind of committee world, where they basically come into the country and say, right, what is it you want? What are you looking for here? And we'll write the report for you. So they met with a bunch of different pro-abortion groups, and they wrote this report that included a range of recommendations around abortion, but also around changing the moral fabric of the country. Now, with any committee report coming from the UN, especially a committee report that is so one-sided and so agenda-based, the UK government can just ignore them. And in fact, every single committee report that is being received by the UK government from a UN committee has been ignored. There was no obligation to implement any of this, but that all changed in 2019 with Section 9 of the Northern Ireland Formation Act. And that placed a duty on the Secretary of State to implement all this and all the recommendations. And then in 2020, 2021, and 2022, Brandon Lewis at the time gave himself more and more and more powers. And it is those powers that have enabled the current Secretary of State to change our RSE regulations. So first of all, in terms of RSE, well, what did CEDAW actually say? And this is the part of the CEDAW report that relates specifically to RSE. So in relation to education, the CEDAW report found in particular, that young people in Northern Ireland were denied the education necessary to enjoy their sexual and reproductive health and rights. Most children in Northern Ireland attend denominational schools, either Catholic or Protestant. Church representatives, sorry, I was trying to move my screen out of the way. Church representatives play active roles in school management boards, and the result is that relationship and sexuality education, although a recommended part of the primary and post-primary statutory curriculum of the Department of Education, is underdeveloped or non-existent since it is at a school's discretion to implement the contents of the curriculum according to its values and ethos. Where relationship and sexuality education is delivered, it is frequently provided by third parties and based on anti-abortion and abstinence ethos. They then concluded those factors point to state negligence in pregnancy prevention through a failure to implement its recommended curriculum on relationship and sexuality education. So see that these are the comments. Now, for anybody who knows anything about education in Northern Ireland, they'll know the CEDAW talking out their backsides here, because first of all, we don't have Protestant denominational schools in Northern Ireland. We have a Catholic maintained sector, and we have controlled schools that fall under state control, but they're not Protestant denominational schools. So that's a load of rubbish in the first place. The second thing is the Human Rights Commission did a report last year, and they asked schools for their RSE policies, and they got well over 100 of them. So the idea that RSE is non-existent is again absolutely rubbish. But it comes back to the agenda that they had to push, their beliefs that they were trying to push, and they're criticizing here an anti-abortion and abstinence ethos in our education. Now, based on their findings, then they placed a bunch of recommendations in paragraph 85 and 86. Paragraph 85 was about the changes to the abortion laws in Northern Ireland. Paragraph 86 was about changing the moral fabric of Northern Ireland. And specifically, paragraph 86D says, make age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights a compulsory component of curriculum for adolescents, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, and monitor its implementation. Section 9, as we said, took that and made it UK law. So it placed a duty on the Secretary of State to ensure that the recommendations in paragraph 85 and 86 of the CEDAW report are implemented in respect of Northern Ireland. So he was, any Secretary of State we have are duty bound by law in the UK to implement the recommendations of this biased, agenda-based UN committee who made these recommendations about Northern Ireland. Now, what we've seen over the last couple of years is the Secretary of State giving himself more and more and more powers. And the 2022 abortion regulations were the ones for me that were particularly scary for anybody who has any respect for the concept of democracy. Because there was a clause in those regulations that said the Secretary of State may do anything that a Northern Ireland minister or Northern Ireland Department could do for the purpose of ensuring that the recommendations in paragraph 85 and 86 of the CEDAW report are implemented in respect of Northern Ireland. So in effect, what can happen is the Secretary of State can appoint himself as the Education Minister, or appoint himself as the Health Minister, or appoint himself as Communities Minister, can take decisions that were normally reserved for all 90 MLAs, and he can do it unilaterally. Now, that is terrifying for anybody who believes in democracy, that one person, without a single vote, without a mandate here, can appoint themselves to the most powerful positions in our country and make decisions that will affect the lives of the people who live here without ever receiving a vote in our land. So that leads us on then to what Heaton Harris is doing. So Heaton Harris has effectively appointed himself as the Education Minister, and he is now directing the Department of Education in the way that an Education Minister would. And the regulations that he has put forward, and we're going to concentrate just really on two main areas of it. His regulations amend the Education Order 2006 and the Minimum Content Order from 2007. We talked about those at the start. It amends them for adolescents to make age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion, a compulsory component of the curriculum for adolescents. He then places a duty on the Department of Education to issue guidance by the 1st of January 2024 on the content and delivery of the education required to be provided. So, big claim for those who are pushing the idea of RSE Light, who are pushing this idea that this is going to not be too bad, and that schools will still be able to tailor the curriculum in whatever way they want, is this claim. Schools will continue to be able to tailor the curriculum to match their ethos. Now, if we think about it, there is some evidence to suggest that could be the case, because that's the way the curriculum is designed to work in Northern Ireland, as we showed. This isn't just for RSE, this is true for everything in the curriculum, that schools are able to tailor the curriculum to match their needs and match the needs of their pupils. So, why would RSE be any different than that? There's also the fact that the regulations only change one aspect of the minimum content. And if we go back to the table that we've already looked at for RSE, these are the new regulations, or the updated version of the regulations. And you can see that there is a slight change on the right-hand column. It's in square brackets. And if we zoom in, you can see that now at the bottom of the screen, where the legislation or the regulations laid by the Secretary of State have changed the minimum content to put in those couple of lines you see at the bottom of the screen. So those who believe that the schools will still be able to tailor the curriculum to their ethos, they're looking at this and say, well, schools have been taking those first 6 for 15 years and have been tailoring those that are ethos, so they should be able to do it with the last one. This is an opportunity. This isn't a threat, and they don't believe that this is going to be really that bad. But there's lots of evidence against that viewpoint, and we want to look at a few pieces of the evidence themselves. And the first piece of evidence that we're going to look at comes directly from the regulations themselves. So this is in the regulations that Chris Heaton Harris laid, and it says the department must, by the 1st of January 2024, issue guidance on the content, and this is so important, and delivery of the education required to be provided by virtue of Article 5(1)(a), which is the regulations that we just showed you. This is different. This is not how the Northern Ireland curriculum works. The Northern Ireland curriculum works by schools being able to tailor the delivery based on the pupils that they teach, or in the case of RSE, they tailor the delivery of the lessons for their own school ethos. But here the regulations are saying the department must decide on the delivery and how the lessons are delivered, not the school. So it is in the regulations, it says the guidance is issued with a view to ensuring that pupils receive the education on sexual and reproductive health and rights, covering prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. And the education is age appropriate, comprehensive, and scientifically accurate. So this is very, very, very different and very worrying for anybody who works in education and knows how our curriculum has been developed and is supposed to work, because this is not it. The second big thing that you need to be aware of is, again, various reports. And we talked a little bit about the CEDAW report and their main findings, and you can see that it talks about ethos. Everything here in the CEDAW report that is uh, a criticism of RSE in Northern Ireland is purely about ethos. They're criticising the Christian ethos, and the Christian ethos impacting upon this education that they want to deliver. And specifically, they say these factors, the idea that schools are tailoring the curriculum to reflect their ethos, points to state negligence. So it's very clear that CEDAW do not want schools to be able to tailor the curriculum to their own ethos, when they have spoken very directly about it in their report. You can then go on and look at the Human Rights Commission, who have said the same. They criticise the abstinence that is taught within RSE in Northern Ireland. They criticise the fact that there's an anti-abortion view in Northern Ireland with regards to the RSE, and they want the ethos removed from the teaching of RSE. If we then go to the Secretary of State's statement on the 6th of June, when he made a written statement to the House of Commons, he said in his statement, "I wish to be clear that educating adolescents on issues such as contraception and access to abortion in Northern Ireland should be done in a factual way that does not advocate or oppose a particular view on the moral and ethical considerations of abortion or contraception." Again, this means that a teacher or a school cannot impart any values in the teaching of these areas, and therefore cannot tailor the curriculum to match their own ethos. With each piece of legislation comes an explanatory memorandum, and the explanatory memorandum for the Secretary of State's regulations basically explains the whole thinking behind what he is doing, and the whole reasoning behind doing it. And there's a bit of an explanation in that memorandum that explains why he's doing this now and not leaving it to the Northern Ireland Assembly or the Minister for Education when we get one. And it says, following several years of engagement, in July 2022, the Northern Ireland Minister of Education, who was Michelle McIlveen at that time, clarified the department's position, which is that the curriculum in relationships and sexuality is a matter for schools and teachers to decide how it should be delivered, which resources to use, and which specific topics should be covered. This position is in direct conflict with the Secretary of State's legal duty to ensure that the recommendations in paragraph 85 and 86 of CEDAW are implemented in respect of Northern Ireland. Again, this is very clear that schools being able to tailor their RSE curriculum to match their own ethos is not acceptable when it's put up against the requirements of CEDAW. So that leads us to one conclusion. Any RSE curriculum that allows RSE to be taught in line with the school's ethos will be incompatible with CEDAW. The curriculum will, our feeling is, in all likelihood, be highly prescriptive, because the Department of Education are under the duty to tell schools how it must be delivered. And it is this highly prescriptive nature that will stop schools from tailoring the curriculum to match their own ethos. But what will be on the curriculum? That's the next big question. And we're trying to leave you with a kind of EastEnders style cliffhanger tonight. Next week, we'll be taking a really deep look at what it means in the CEDAW regulations when it talks about comprehensive education on sexual reproductive health and rights, what that means, and what it could mean for our children going forward in terms of RSE education in schools. And then we're going to be laying out what you can do about it and how you can take a stand against it. So please do come back next week when we'll be discussing the curriculum and what it will look like further. It's going to be pretty explosive next week, so please do share it with everybody that you know, and other people who would be interested, and get them along because it is going to be so important. Just having a look at questions. We've got a question there from Julianne. Do we know what the consequences will be for a school if they don't deliver this on the grounds that it is against their ethos? So schools will be under a legal duty to deliver this. And if we take it, in terms of, let's talk about maths, for example. If I was not delivering the minimum content for maths, which I have a legal duty and the school has a legal duty to do, what would happen? Well, the first thing that would happen is they would have to find out. And the way that would happen is the ETI, the Education and Training Inspectorate, would come into school and they say, right, let me see your policies around maths. Let me see what content you're delivering. And they would make a judgment that you were not fulfilling the legal requirements for the subject that you're going to have to teach. And what we're going to see, I believe, in this is the Education and Training Inspectorate being weaponized and becoming like Nazi foot soldiers going around schools checking up to see if the propaganda machine is going or not. And there are all sorts of implications for schools in terms of a negative report from the ETI. So that it can be a negative report. Negative ETI reports can put people off coming to the school. But you can go down the stages of formal intervention where the ETI would basically come in and take over the school and the running of it and change the policies themselves. Now, what needs to happen, in our opinion, is that we need all schools with a Christian ethos to basically say, no, we're not going to do this. And we don't care what you do. Because if we have them all doing that, it becomes very difficult for the ETI to take any action upon it. And we've seen that happen in the past around academic selection. So the department issued guidance back in the late 2000s to say, we are ending academic selection. And the response to that was, from the selective grammar schools was, well, we're not going to abide by your rules here. We're going to continue with academic selection. And they set up private companies who run the academic selection for them. And because of the sheer number that are doing it, they can't be touched. So we need numbers here of schools who are willing to stand up and say no, and are willing to take the stand. But that's a great question. And again, I think the ETI will be weaponized to try and force this on schools.
Okay. Mark, thanks so much for presentation tonight. I know it has probably provoked a lot of questions, but I think we can see very clearly this plan through CEDAW into Section 9 into the regulations is copper fastened. They know that the opposition from Northern Ireland was going to be incredibly huge, and they have considered every eventuality, and they are describing this to the very nth degree what exactly has to happen. So thank you for outlining that for us tonight. If you have, do send them through to us at info@niagainstrse.com. I would want to just remind you, we have a number of public meetings coming up. We have one in South Down, Mullerton House near Annalong on Thursday the 28th of September. We have another one then in East Belfast, Templemore Hall on October the 10th. But I do want to draw your attention particularly to a major event that we will be hosting on Thursday, the 5th of October in Portadown. We have an expert coming from the United States to help us with this issue. And he's going to be able to, he's a pastor in a solution for all Christians to get this stopped. So we're going to be giving you details of that event in the next week, 10 days, as we get details confirmed. So that's going to be in the Portadown area, Thursday, the 5th of October. It's directed at pastors, leaders, teachers, school governors, anyone in positions of authority. It's directed at, but it is an open meeting. You will be welcome, not in any of those positions, but I want to encourage particularly anyone who's involved in a position of responsibility, you want to come to that presentation. So we're going to be outlining, we've just got these details confirmed in the last 24, 48 hours. So we'll hopefully be able to get that information out next. Have you anything final you want to say?
No, okay. I just want to encourage you, share tonight's video because it's incredibly important. But also, you know, when we put out the details for next week's meeting, please share it. It is the really, really important one as we look at content and what content the Department of Education have lined up, what could happen around the 1st of January and what will eventually happen if the content does not meet the CEDAW requirements that are to be delivered. So please join us next week and share that event with everyone you know.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Good night. God bless you all. Thanks for all your support. And together, through prayer and persistence, we can defeat this as it comes into our country. So God bless you.